Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Picture in a Thousand Words. It's been a while. 2019 is behind us. It was a great year for me. It was quite a journey, and if you want to know more about it, don't be shy. You can ping me on various channels. I'm happy to engage. I've got the time to do it. I've decided to record an episode after a bit of a senescence because I just sort of had I don't want to say epiphany, but an observation based on the recent tragedy of Kobe Bryant that I wanted to capture while it was still somewhat top of mind because I thought it was interesting, impactful, however you want to look at it. But for me, what links these two people, well, there's actually a number of things that links these two people: tragedy, talent, scandal, Staples Center. They're two individuals who have really captivated a widespread, if not global, audience and have had moments of supreme adulation, worldwide adulation, but also the inverse. And they definitely embroiled some pretty negative opinions. And to certain degrees, are understandable. And so the reason why I'm choosing now to do this is that I think that we are in the midst of an arc for the Kobe Bryant situation. And before I go into that, let's talk about MJ for a little bit. So for many decades, he was a profoundly talented individual. He is inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame not once but twice. So through even the 80s, he was a bit of an odd and mysterious character, eccentric, but he was generally universally loved. And then things got sticky in the early 90s. There were accusations of sexual impropriety, and that was a rocky road for about 10 years. There were shades of comeback, if you want to call it that. But sort of before we really ever got resolution on who he was as a person, we lost him. His sort of bizarre lifestyle and his addictions got the better of him, and he eventually succumbed to his own use of narcotics and died from an overdose. And then that was in 2009. And what was amazing about that period of time was there was this universal support and outcry for him. People kind of forgot about the past and just revered him. And all of these people came out of the woodwork to support him when for probably 15 years, it was not cool to be a fan of Michael Jackson. I, for one, have gone ups and downs with him. I share not only a namesake, but some initials. My middle name is Joseph. So I have always had a special place in my heart for him. Not only that, but because he's just this sort of extreme entertainer. And I've sort of been accused of some similar things. But anyway, I was always sort of miffed by the fact that people came out in support of him in 2009 when he died, because I thought to myself, like, where were all of you guys for the last 15 years? But it sort of was what it was. And then, about 10 years later, the HBO documentary comes out, sort of Return to Neverland or whatever it's called, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was really fascinating. Not because I discovered anything that I didn't know already. I had my suspicions that he had likely done what he was accused of. I just got better resolution of it. And I found that it was remarkable that the whole world turned on him again, even though he had been dead the entire time, because they had a better sense of what did or didn't happen. And so I think that that's unfortunate. I'm curious where all the fans are that came out in 2009, where they were in 2019. But that just sort of is what it is. Now, going back to Kobe, I think we're in a similar inflection point. Kobe Bryant, there are a lot of people that loved him. There are a lot of people that hated him, my brother being one of them, but he was universally respected. And at this moment in time, just a few weeks after his death, there is this global support and outcry for him. They named the MVP award of the All-Star game after him most recently. But like Michael Jackson, he has a tricky and checkered past. Nothing as dramatic as MJ, but it's there if you want to look for it. But what's also interesting is that as more detail and more granularity gets applied to his life and more specifically his death, I think that the jury is out on how he will be remembered. Much like MJ, the sort of the benefits of being as wealthy as he was, the luxuries that he had of flying around in a helicopter, caught up with him. And in so doing, he not only took his own life, but also the lives of his daughter and a handful of other individuals. And what I think is interesting is that much like when MJ died in 2009, there was this universal support for Kobe. Everybody just sort of came out of the woodwork to say how much they loved him. And I really, for one, really liked seeing that. We live in a day and age now where that's not the prevailing emotion. There's a lot more skepticism and cynicism out there than I'm sure all of us would want. And this felt like a moment where everybody kind of came out of the woodwork in support of this individual. And there was a lot of joy that was gleaned from his lasting memory. And the cynic in me wonders how long it'll last. I wonder when and for how long the details of his death will stay dormant, and when folks really start to pry and poke at it and get greater and more refined granularity on what did or didn't happen and how that affects our lasting memory of him. And I think what's worth noting is that it doesn't matter. Much like what happened with MJ, greater granularity maybe matters to a handful of people, those involved. But to the rest of us, we can choose how we remember this person, and we can choose to hold on to the joy and the excitement and the entertainment value that they provided, and kind of pick and choose how we want to remember that person. And I think the sports community has absorbed the Black Mamba culture, which I think is fantastic. I think it highlights the idea that you don't have to apologize for being competitive and ruthless in your competitiveness. We didn't really have the visibility on Michael Jordan that we had on Kobe, but Michael Jordan was probably very similar. And I think that Kobe gives athletes permission to be tenacious. I think what's unfortunate is that just as Kobe was beginning to explore a 2.0 of his life, things were cut short. And so what he could have meant to a broader grouping of people, not just athletes, is sort of left unexplored. And I think that is a lasting legacy that is worth holding on to. And as the story of him becomes, I don't want to say lost to history, but as we begin to distance ourselves from it, I think it's worth noting that there will be a compulsion to, especially if we're truth seekers and really want to get to the bottom of what did or didn't happen, that could tarnish how we feel about this individual. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but it happened with MJ. And I think that I see the joy that his death, his martyrdom really gave to the world. And I just hope that there's some way that we can hold on to it, if only to realize that we are all people. We are all individuals who have as fragile an existence as Kobe's did. And that empathy can be shared amongst us. And we should, or at least attempt to, hold on to that same degree of human compassion to those that are still living. And while there are things about our heroes that we want to remember, and there are things about our heroes that maybe we want to forget, I think it's worth noting that it's valuable to hold on to the way we feel from an empathetic perspective, to just feel for Kobe's family members who are left behind, the other families that were devastated by it, and know that that type of emotion is possible, and it can be felt for people that aren't stars. And just because a tragedy happens to somebody that's famous doesn't mean that similar tragedies or similar emotion can't be shared for those that are to our left and to our right. And so that's essentially just what I wanted to capture here. I thought that this pairing was remarkable. It comes from an actual article from 2016 where Kobe speaks to the legacy that Michael Jackson had on him. So the pairing is actually quite authentic. I just think that we as people nowadays in an information age can be jaded by information. And I'm just sort of trying to stay ahead and say to, yes, Kobe was fantastic. Let's try to remember him in the best way possible. And as we explore, it may be easier for us to judge him for what he did in terms of putting himself and his family and other families at risk. And you can choose to lean into that if you want to. I don't think that it will get anywhere positive. But much like Michael Jackson, let's just try to hold on to what was worth holding on to and just accept, but maybe not overinterpret the things that are true, but potentially not impactful. Anyway, it's been a while, and I'm just sort of happy to be back in the mix. Anyway, take care.